Hello everyone, my name is Achax and today we are going to talk about how to find your opponent's weakness. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be the first to see more content designed to help you rank up just like this. Alright, let's get right into it. A lot of people make finding weaknesses really difficult because they think that weaknesses are scarce and hidden for any specific team. In reality, most teams have many weaknesses which are clearly visible. A weakness is simply a self-imposed disadvantage. Once you see that weakness, taking advantage of that disadvantage usually comes down to really simple decision making. When you look for a weakness, you want to notice what an opponent does or does not do. For example, do they push catwalk on ascent? Do they play 2 middle? Noticing seemingly small choices like these are very important. Patterns are the key to a weakness. If you can see the pattern up to a current point, you can predict how it continues. A pattern of weakness is something you can plan for in advance, and they tend to be more consistent than momentary weaknesses. A momentary weakness may be there for a short time in round 2, but a pattern may be predictably there for rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. This allows you to react more quickly because you knew it was there, and to use it more often until the opponent adapts if they do. My favorite types of weaknesses are instances where an opponent has no choice but to have a weakness. For example, a player can either peek A long or not peek A long. They cannot both peek A long and not peek A long at the same time. If they peek, then you as the attacker have a chance to score a pick and gain a numbers advantage. If they don't peek, you can quickly take A long control free of utility and cost. Either is a weakness. In scenarios like these, the question is not whether the weakness is there, the question is which weakness is there. And that makes them a lot easier to spot because you know what you're looking for. When you're looking for a weakness, you don't need to find kryptonite. You just need to observe what the opponent does and come up with a good plan to use what your opponent does against them. You want to look for patterns in your opponent's choices and actions. Most players do not have a ton of variation in their game. They tend to play the same site on defense most of the game. They tend to either peak a significant amount of the time or not peak a significant amount of the time. Many teams even subconsciously attack at around the same time every round. Noticing patterns like these can be a huge help because they allow you to predict your opponents in advance, which means you can look for a specific opportunity. Things are usually easier to find when you are looking for them. For example, a common pattern you should look for is impatience. Impatience is when players make poor decisions as a result of boredom. If you are on attack and you notice players pushing after 15 seconds or so of nothing, then slow down and use more of the round before committing to the attack. Another pattern to look for is aggression. This is very similar to impatience, but the signal is a little different. Aggressive players tend to attack immediately, regardless of boredom. A similar strategy as impatience could work very well. However, my preference is to hold for 5 seconds in a default across the whole map in the hope of a free pick somewhere before continuing with the round as normal. Another weakness is playing the same spot over and over. You can then pre-fire that spot for an easy frag. The greatest weakness you should take notice of is whether or not the opponent adapts when you exploit their weaknesses. Do they change to counter you? If not, you can just keep using the same weakness over and over. The greater your understanding of the game in a diverse subject range such as positioning, timing, map control, and all of the others, the list is quite long, the better you will be able to see weaknesses since you can see more patterns. A specific weakness that I want to point out is more environmental than player-driven and has to do with map design. This is the combination of a few simple concepts. Firstly, defenders must defend multiple areas, meaning they tend to split up. They must do this until you commit. Second, maps aren't really designed to be defendable with less than a full team of 5 all alive. Third, if the offense moves forward, the defense must fight them or give up sight at some point. When we combine these 3 concepts, we can see 3 things right off the bat. 1. A 1-for-1 trade is almost always an advantage for the attackers. 2. A 1-for-1 trade is almost always easier for attackers in theory because attackers can group up while defenders must hold the entire map. And 3. Defenders must fight attackers if they want to hold an area. As a result, the attackers have the power to set those engagements and determine which areas they want. How do you utilize this weakness? This is an example of really basic decision making. Add a new strategy to your pocket on attack. Find opportunities where the most negative outcome is probably a 1-for-1 trade and take those fights, then reset. Let the defenders spread more thinly. Give them time to make their hold everywhere weaker. This is not the only environmental weakness, but it's one that I find super helpful. Alright, if opposing players have so many weaknesses and it's so easy to find one, why don't more people intentionally utilize weaknesses all the time? Well, for one, a lot of players don't look for weaknesses. You aren't one of these players anymore, so that's a good thing. For another, many players have a one-dimensional understanding of the game. They only look at the surface level and just see the game as two teams shooting each other. Or they have a linear view of the game in which some players are better than other players in a ladder shape, rather than a web where every player has a variety of strengths and weaknesses. Many players don't take the time to figure out what the weaknesses are. You have to poke, and you have to attack areas for information and test defenses. Ironically, not poking is a weakness, and it's a very common one. Once you learn something, take a mental note and make sure to use that information if it can benefit you. Most players aren't very adaptable. They lack the adaptability to execute counter plans and instead do the same few things over and over regardless of who they are playing. And finally, some teams can't execute proper counter plans because the plans demand cohesion when the players have their own weaknesses, especially impatience or a lone wolf mindset that doesn't allow the proper coordination. These are all things you want to look out for and avoid so that you can improve the effectiveness of finding weaknesses and capitalizing on them. You should also know that finding a weakness isn't the same as utilizing it. You do need to come up with a good counter plan and effectively execute it. Hopefully the examples from earlier helped you get a good idea of what that might look like. What weaknesses do you notice in teams you have played in the past, maybe as you watch this video? Comment down below. I hope you found some value in this video. Best of luck everyone, and I will see you in the next one.